Everyone, it's good to be with you again on this morning, and to those of you who are here and those of you who are watching wherever it is you watch from. I'm glad that you are a part of this. So we've been looking. Last week I read a story, a narrative from Luke 10. Remember the parable of the Good Samaritan. And this week, we're still in Luke 10. I'm still in Luke 10. I'm stuck in Luke 10. It's kind of like traffic coming down from Miami. I'm stuck on Isla Mirada, and I'm still on Luke 10. And if you back up one verse in Luke 10, one verse prior to the narrative of, we're looking at Mary and Martha today, just go back one verse, and you're going to come to the conclusion of the Good Samaritan. That's where you are. And the story of the Good Samaritan finishes with a question. Jesus gives the readers, that's why I liked your opening music, Jesus gives the readers a choice. He gives them a choice, and Jesus says, which of these, and you get to pick the priest, the Levite, and the Samaritan, which of these was the neighbor to the man who was in the ditch? And the response comes that it's the Samaritan. And Jesus finishes that narrative, that story, with 4 words. Go and do likewise. That's it. And then you get a new story. You get Mary and Martha. And Mary and Martha, there's drama in their story, but it's not the drama of pulling somebody from the ditch. It's the drama that we find in our everyday homes, right? There can be some drama in our homes. And so it's the drama that's found in the home of Mary and Martha, these 2 sisters. And the story goes like this. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, they're going to Jerusalem. They're on their way. They came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her doors to Jesus. And Martha had a sister, and her sister's name is Mary. And Mary sits at the feet of Jesus and listens to his word. Listen to all the words that he was speaking. But Martha was the word that gets used most frequently is Martha was distracted. You ever been distracted? So Martha gets distracted. And what she gets distracted by, she's distracted by, it says, by the preparations that had to be made for when Jesus comes to visit. And so she came to Jesus and she says to Jesus, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. It sounds like drama to me. You're gonna go to your guest and you're gonna say to your guest, don't you care? Get on her. Tell her to help me. And so I love this part of the story. Jesus responds to her. Jesus says, Martha, Martha. And actually says that in the story. And I've always thought about what would it be like? What would you say if Martha came up and said that to you? How would you say her name? Martha. I don't know, but he says, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset and distracted by many things. But few things are needed. And Mary here has chosen what is better. And it will not be taken away from her. That's the end of the story. Now, some people believe that these 2 stories, and both of these stories are only found in the Gospel of Luke. They're nowhere else in all of Scripture and in the Bible. And some people believe that Luke purposely paired these 2 stories together. There are actually people who get paid to write that sort of stuff. That Luke purposely paired these 2 stories together. The Good Samaritan followed by Mary and Martha. Now, before I go on, I need to acknowledge somebody, and that somebody is, I need to acknowledge my mother. Okay? My mother did not like this story of Mary and Martha. She didn't like it. And my mother would say, if I have to hear one more sermon about these two sisters, I'm going to fly to the moon. Now, let me just insert one thing. I've been up in Miami the last couple of days, and I went and did some shopping at Dayland and did all that. And I got some places I like to go to. And I went into Bed Bath & Beyond, and they have a men's section over there. I always go over and look and see what their new scent, what their new thing is there. And they had a whole new product for the summer, and it's called Fly to the Moon. So I had to buy it. All right, and that's what my mother would say. If I have to hear this story one more time, I'm going to fly to the moon. And that was my mother's way of cussing, of swearing. She'd say, fly to the moon. Well, I once told her, I said, Mom, I think you might be projecting. My mother was the oldest of two sisters, and they grew up on a Nebraska farm during the Depression. In the 1930s. And each morning before school, I'm told that it was my mother's farm chore, her farm task, we had chores, and it was her farm chore to go out and collect the eggs. All right? And she would always go, I've collected so many eggs in my life, you should have seen my hands, they'd all get pecked. And well, why didn't you wear gloves, but all right. But that was her chore, to go out and collect the eggs. And because both of her parents worked, it was in the Depression, her mom was a nurse, her dad was out in the field farming, and she had to care for her younger sister, who was 5 years younger. I'm tired of hearing about Mary, my mother would say. Where would we be without Martha? Where would we be without the Marthas of this world? But on the day when Jesus comes to visit their home, Jesus makes a choice. And Jesus says to Martha that Mary made the better choice. That Mary made the better choice to set aside her eggs, so to speak, and sit by Jesus. So does that mean that Martha made a bad choice? The wrong choice? Just fill in the blank. Is that what that means? So back to those city commissioners. On Monday, June 30th, Commissioner Donnie Lee told everyone attending the special meeting of the Key West City Commissioners that he was going to vote with his heart. Remember, I don't know if anybody was there and heard that, but he did say that. He goes, I'm going to vote with my heart to rescind the agreement between the Key West Police Department and ICE. So in talking about his choice, Donnie, who is a fifth-generation conch, I mean, that's something, fifth generation? Fifth generation, and one time the Key West chief of police, he said that he had come to the meeting prepared to vote with his head. Prepared to vote with his head. But upon listening to the testimony of all those Key West citizens that night, many of whom also got up there and told of their own conch pedigree, Donnie said he had decided to change. And he was going to vote with his heart. And I don't know, I'm not in law enforcement, but have you ever tried to talk your way out of a ticket with somebody? And I always usually use, heart language. It doesn't go very far. They kind of look at you like, okay, heard that one before. But he said he changed his vote, and he was going to vote with his heart. And everybody in the room over there, they applauded. Was that the better choice? Was that the right choice? See why I like that music? Now, my example, is not intended to be political at all, in fact. But it is intended to illumine and shine a light on the story of Mary and Martha, and really the story that precedes it, the story of the Good Samaritan. So 8 days later, after Donnie voted with his heart, and the other commissioners apparently did too, the commissioners revisited their testimony. They revisited their vote. And there were hours of testimony again, well-documented testimony, even a song from two residents who got up there with their guitar, and they sang Woody Guthrie's 1948 Deportee. I'd never heard it until that night. And as I listened to it, if that didn't play on your heart, I don't know what will. You know, these people up there singing their hearts out, playing it, and they get done, with all that, and the commissioners decide to change, and they voted with their head. So was that the better choice? You know, is that all of a sudden the better choice now? Then just a few days later, I think it was on a Tuesday night, this is on a Friday night, the Key West Immigration Coalition, 3 days later, they met. And they met at the Key West United Methodist Church. And the room was full. And I went because I wanted to observe what was going on and hear about what was going on, plus they had free pizza. Thank you. And so I went, and the place was full, and it took everyone in the room, it happened in less than 2 hours, probably in less than an hour and a half, and everyone in the room formed into 6 committees, and each committee was assigned with a task, and you could pick what committee you want to be a part of, and each committee was assigned with a task to go out and do good for others, do good for the immigrants that lived on the island that might be facing ICE. So they came and they had to make a choice too, didn't they? Those in the room? Was it the better choice? In how we live, and how you and I go about loving, and how we give, and how we care, and how we serve, and how we come into relationship with one another, with each other, and with the divine God. In all those in-hows, is there a better choice? Both the parable of the Good Samaritan and the story of Mary and Martha, they turn on choices. They do. They turn on choices. You know, and how can we make the better choice? What prepares us to make the better choice? And these two stories turn on choices. The Levite and the priest, they chose to pass by. The Samaritan chose to stop and help. Jesus commends the Samaritan's choice. Martha chose to clean the house, to do the dishes. I don't know, but she chose to do the task of working in the house. Mary, the sister, chose to sit at the feet of Jesus. Jesus commends Mary's choice. The story of the Good Samaritan says that we have a responsibility to do good for others. That we're charged with that responsibility. And that responsibility is more important than any religious ritual that the priest or the Levite might choose to perform. They passed by. It's more important than sitting in prayer each day. Sitting in prayer each day, apparently in this story, does not necessarily guarantee that you're going to be a good person. But then there's Mary. One verse later, we meet Mary, who sits at the feet of Jesus without concern for other pressing tasks and makes the better choice. When it comes to how we live in best relationship with the divine God and one another, Luke gives us two stories of choices. Two completely different stories about choices. And nowhere in the narrative, in either story, does it say to you, reader, pick one. Such is the grace of God. Nowhere does it say that. It doesn't say pick head or heart. It just tells you the stories. So I'm going to tell you a story about somebody that I've known for many years. She's passed away. And actually, she's a lifelong family friend. Her name was Opal Bowmaster. Isn't that a great name? Opal Bowmaster. And she was a 60-some-year member of the United Methodist Church in Seward. She died at age 96 in 2016. My family, they were in the same kind of circles, the education that we were all in, and so we've always known each other. But I really got to know Opal when I became her pastor at the Seward United Methodist Church. Now, in her retirement, she and her husband, Ralph, who she affectionately called Bugs. How would you like to have that as a nickname? Bugs. And she, oh my gosh, I can hear her still saying his name. She and her husband, in their retirement, they visited all 50 states. I guess you can't drive to Hawaii. But you can drive in Hawaii. But they visited all 50 states. They had one last state to visit. Florida. And they had one place that they wanted to come to in Florida. Doesn't everybody? Right? They wanted to come to Key West. So in February of 1988, they were on their way to Key West. And I don't know enough about the 7 Mile Bridge, but I doubt it had been redesigned in 1988. I don't know. But they were crossing the 7 Mile Bridge in February of 1988, and they were involved in a car accident, and Ralph died. Opal was in the hospital for months, so it must have been some accident. And she was unable to attend her husband's funeral, memorial service. I once asked her about that. I said, what was that like? And she said, well, they gave Ralph a remarkable send-off, and that's really all that matters. That's what she said. How do you say something like that? Upon returning, eventually Opal came back to Seward. And she made a choice to live life fully. That was a choice that she made. And she became, in that church, what I would call one of the most remarkable Marthas that I've ever known. Want something done? Get a hold of Opal. She became a very remarkable Martha for that church. She was always doing for others. Now, it's February 14th, 2010. And on February 14th, which was a Sunday, Opal turned 90. And her granddaughter was coming out from Lincoln to sing a song for her and worship that morning. Lincoln's only about 25 miles away, and was driving out to sing for Opal that morning. But that's when what I still to this day call it the Valentine's Day blizzard. And it set in at about 9:05 that morning. And everybody knew that it was coming. And we got there into worship, and Opal was one of 9 people in worship that morning. She was one of 9 in worship. And I thought, I was there, the music person was there, the liturgist had made it, the people back there had made it, and maybe, Opal and a couple others. But there were 9 people in that sanctuary that morning. And so I went up to her and I said, "What are you doing here?" Because she would have to be out there driving her car, right? And I know Seward's a small town, but she's out there driving. And I said, "What are you doing here, Opal?" And she goes, "Well, it's my 90th birthday. Where else would I want to come and sit?" You hear that? Where else would I want to come and sit? So 6 years later, when it came time for her memorial service, she passed away on a piece of paper. Do you know how when people get ready for their memorial service and on a piece of paper, you find it, the family finds, or you've told the family where it is, and she writes down, what people write down what they want in their service. So there was on that piece of paper in Opal's handwriting what she wanted. She had hymns. And she had jotted down Luke 10:38 through 42. And I thought, oh, is that the story of Mary and Martha? And so I opened up the Bible, and sure enough, Luke 10, verses 38 through 42 is the story of Mary and Martha. I've done it, lots of memorial services for people, and people pick their scripture or their readings or whatever they want, and so you try to relate your message to what it is that they picked. And so there was Mary and Martha. I can honestly tell you, I've never preached, spoke, given a message, a talk at a memorial service on Mary and Martha. I couldn't fathom how that related. And so I thought about that. How do you preach Mary and Martha at a memorial service? At Opal Bowlmaster's memorial service. All I could think of to say was, Opal chose both. Pretty remarkable. Opal chose both. And in choosing both, we were all the better for it. Amen.